What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Marvel Standom. I am your host, Mike Cicchini, and with me for all time and always, I have Den of Geek news and features editor Kirsten Howard and Den of Geek TV editors Alec Bajalid and Katie Burt. And this week, we are once again talking about What If, and it might just be the darkest episode of What If so far. What if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands? Kirsty, why don't you tell us what happened here?
In episode 4, Christine Palmer's death becomes the catalyst for Stephen Strange's path to Sorcerer Supreme. But it's a dark path that involves absorbing power from other creatures in an effort to bring her back, because men will literally summon Shuma Gorath rather than go to therapy. Ultimately, Stephen's choices lead to the destruction of this alternate universe, while Uatu watches and refuses to intervene.
I feel very attacked by Kirsty's synopsis of this episode this week, but nevertheless, let's get right into this. I think this might be the best episode yet, for some, if not all, of the reasons just cited. Where does everybody fall on this one?
Okay. I really didn't like this episode. I do think that the ending saved it a little bit for me. You know, those moments where we see the Watcher interact with Doctor Strange are important or interesting. And I also think that seeing what it looks like when a universe dies is also important and interesting. This just relied on so many of the superhero tropes that I hate the most, including like the defining aspect of this universe seemed to be that it just wanted to fridge Christine so bad that like that was just literally an absolute truth of this universe. Christine's character has never been a real character to me. Like, I often compare the first Doctor Strange to Iron Man, the first Iron Man, because I think the movies are trying to do similar things, but I think there are fundamental differences to the, you know, hero arc in both those movies that means that for me, Doctor Strange doesn't survive, or doesn't survive. He doesn't survive in this, but doesn't succeed in the way that Iron Man does so well. I don't know. It just seems like the moral of the story was that Doctor Strange had to learn that his actions have consequences, which is a lesson that most of us are forced to learn as children, and only the most privileged people manage to get to adulthood and not learn. And I'm happy for Doctor Strange that he's able to learn that lesson here, but I just don't want to have to go on that journey with him, because I already learned that a while ago. I'll let someone else talk for a while.
Well, I neatly split the difference between the two of you, because I think the first half of this is the worst What If episode, and the second half is the best. That neatly describes how I feel about the original Doctor Strange. I remember I watched Doctor Strange at home, not in a theater, and kind of like divorced from the rest of the MCU, so I wasn't really comparing it to much else. But the first half of Doctor Strange is so boring and so unimaginative, and it's literally just like Iron Man, but what if worse. But the second half is some of the coolest stuff that the MCU has ever done. The Dormammu I've come to bargain scene is maybe my favorite scene in all of the MCU. And I feel the same way about this episode. You're right, Katie. The first half is like, Christine sucks. She just sucks. They had Rachel McAdams, who is one of the most charismatic human beings on the planet, play her in the film and now again in What If. And she might as well be like an NPC in a video game. She's just so lifeless and she sucks. So like that aspect of the story definitely doesn't work. But then when you get into Sorcerer Battle, how am I supposed to resist the charms of Sorcerer Battle?
I think these are all valid points. In the MCU, Stephen Strange hasn't been able to experience the huge consequences of his fuck-ups like he has in the comics. So this is a good representation of that. It felt like the episode was obviously created by people who have a lot of love for those comics. Design-wise, I thought it was right on the money. But yeah, poor Christine. Just what a thankless role.
In my notes, I actually wrote that Christine gets more to do in this episode than she did in the movie.
Wow.
Which is morbid and horrifying, but also true. I didn't even think of this in those terms, and that is because, I mean, you know, this is like a failing of my perspective. Of course, I'm just like, oh, this is a neat way to find a new window into the Doctor Strange origin, right? And then after that, all I cared about was just how wild and supernatural the episode was, because I enjoy the first Doctor Strange movie. All the criticisms of it are valid, especially the fact that it's like far too by the numbers as a superhero origin story for most of it. But the character is still very much an excellent translation of the character from the comics. I've just always wanted to see a Doctor Strange on screen that is less a superheroic part of the MCU and is more demonic and dealing with horrific, like, shadowy elements in the MCU. And we haven't had that yet. There were moments of that in the first movie, but then right after that, it was like right into Infinity War, and right, and like now he's your buddy. He's hanging with the Avengers. He's cracking wise with Spider-Man. And I feel like we've missed a couple of steps with Doctor Strange along the way. And this episode gives me that fix. And all I want now is a Doctor Strange animated series that engages with those supernatural and demonic elements.
I'm so glad you like this, Mike. And we all have different story interests and priorities, and that's fine. I think as long as we all recognize that they can be different, and I think everyone on this call does. But we have this Obang character, and I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, and he also just lets Doctor Strange do whatever he wants, and I don't understand why. Maybe people who have read the comics or who liked the story more than I did could explain that.
He has heterochromia.
That's the key.
I don't know of any wider significance there that I could shed light on from a comics perspective. Do you, Kirsty?
I'm sorry, the guys have come to clean my windows and they're just yelling really loudly outside on the fucking window. And so I didn't hear anything you said because they're just screaming at each other out there. I don't think I've seen him before.
Like Wong, I think this was just another character that needed to let Steven get his way in order for them to tell the story that they wanted to tell.
I do think that's why, the ending works so well, because the Watcher does like subvert that. There's even the point where he's thinking about stepping in and trying to stop Doctor Strange, and he's like, you know what? I don't want to, and he won't listen anyway. So, yeah, I think that is where the episode starts to take a turn for me, and also just having the Watcher at the end be like, no, this is your fault. I do just wish we had learned a little bit more about this universe or cared about the universe, because this sounds very cavalier, but I do think it's, we should feel horrified that a whole universe was like blinked out of existence. But I didn't actually spend that much time hanging out in this universe, so I'm sad we all died in this universe. But yeah, didn't really learn that much about it.
I think what's interesting, Katie, is that even halfway through the episode, I forgot that this was not supposed to be our Doctor Strange. Because the events of the Doctor Strange movie played out almost identically, even with the slight change to his origin story with Christine dying at the beginning, because everything else went the same way, I had to remind myself late in the episode that, actually, no, this is not the MCU's Doctor Strange coming to the rescue. This is still like an alternate universe and a variant universe and whatever.
I think the MCU has obviously been doing a better job at representation and the different kinds of stories they tell and who gets to be a hero. And, recently Kevin Feige came out and said that he didn't use these words exactly, but he regrets whitewashing the Ancient One. I think this would have been a good opportunity to do something different with that character. Yeah, this just seemed like a missed opportunity. It was a missed opportunity for me in lots of different ways. Someone else say something nice about this episode. I feel like I've been such a downer.
This is in no way a good segue, but I thought it was interesting that this is the second appearance of the Shuma Gorath. We obviously had a first look in episode 1 with Captain Carter, and now, it's back. And I'm wondering whether this is like a lead-in to perhaps seeing Captain Carter in live action in Multiverse of Madness, or whether Shuma Gorath is going to be just a recurring sort of character in this season.
I think both of those are distinct possibilities, and I think this episode has a lot of potential ramifications for the real MCU, whether it is the opportunity to recast the Ancient One, or look, I don't expect Multiverse of Madness to have something like, oh, you're only going to understand this plot point if you saw episode 4 of What If, but I could see them alluding to a parallel reality where Steven brought about the end of the universe. I wouldn't be surprised to see Shuma Gorath pop up in that film, because that is a character that was introduced in Doctor Strange comics in the 1970s. And I wonder if we're going to end up getting Jeffrey Wright cameoing as the Watcher to some degree in Multiverse of Madness now, because the Watcher never takes an active role. For him to even address a character like this tells you that shit is going down, and he's going to remember that, and he's not going to be happy about it.
I will say I do like that the Watcher, he's not taking a more active role, but he's coming out from the shadows a bit, and that I feel like just ties together this whole thing as a series all the better, making him slightly more active. And I like the idea of being able to chastise a character at the end of the episode when they've just messed up that badly. I think it works in this context, and I'm just excited to see how he just will make himself known for the remaining 5 episodes. I feel like he will have some sort of arc, and maybe at the conclusion of episode 9 in this season, he will decide that watching kind of sucks.
I do also have to appreciate that, like, the month of Wong is continuing with this episode. Like, it has been it's been a good month for Benedict Wong in the MCU, and Wong the character in the MCU. Folks are going to be delighted with his appearance in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which of course was teased in the trailers. He stole the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer with one line of dialogue. And now here he is, being his kind of gruff and grumpy magical self in this episode. I feel like there are plans for Wong in the MCU right now, and I like the idea that this is somebody that's going to be woven more intricately and importantly into the structure of these movies going forward.
I hope that's true. He's delightful.
I don't think there's many people who would hate the idea of a Wong TV series or movie. He's just had such a huge impact,
Yeah, I like the idea of like a mystical procedural set in the MCU with starring Benedict Wong. I would be very here for that.
One other thing this episode has is jokes. They literally just reused the best joke from Doctor Strange. Maybe the best joke in the history of the MCU. The original Doctor Strange is such a bizarre movie, because half of it is just atrocious and half of it is perfect. But the best joke is they do the his name is Strange joke again.
How long have you been at Kamatage, Mr.
Doctor.
Mr. Doctor?
It's strange.
Maybe. Who am I to judge?
Go this way. Sorcerer Armani.
No, it's strange.
Not any stranger than any other name in this world.
And then later on, I think it's Wong says, mystic beings do not bargain. Which we know is definitely not the case, because the entire climax of Doctor Strange is Doctor Strange bargaining with a mystical being.
This is more serious. I think sometimes when I talk about representation, I want to articulate to people who don't maybe understand why it matters, and this is not directed towards any of you, but I don't know. I think sometimes people think that people pointing things out like this, you can just ignore it. We all have these different things that pull us out and make it unable for us to appreciate the good things about something. And I think for a lot of people, that can be, different kinds of like poor representation, whether it's a female character who doesn't feel like they're acting in a realistic way, or, what have you. for me, especially because those things were so heavy in the first half, that made it harder for me to enjoy the things that were really delightful about the second half, because I think there were a lot, and I liked how weird it was and how weird it got. And I also really liked the capes fighting each other. So that's all I have to say on that point.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the episode, but I agree with all these criticisms. I think they're exactly right, and it's a serious issue. But I enjoyed it probably as a Strange fan. I actually really enjoyed the movie as well. The first time I saw it, I didn't. It was very up and down, and I felt like it was going through the motions, as it were. But as I've rewatched it, I found a lot more to love about it, and I think that perhaps with this episode, despite its drawbacks in terms of the characterization of Christine, there was some good stuff here that I really enjoyed.
I just always think that this is a character who should be really, really walking the line, with forces he does not fully understand, that he could potentially become addicted to, and like the thing to remember is that, he's not an inherently good guy, like he really should be played as kind of like the least good guy of any of the central MCU, heroes. And yet, the MCU, which we all love, does have a way of sanding all of the spiky edges off of characters. So, like, just as it made, Steve Rogers a much more well-rounded and lovable character, and Thor a much more well-rounded and lovable character, it's also kind of turned Peter Parker into like a hall monitor, like, cop wannabe snitch. And it's, and it's kind of turned...
Be
Dr.
careful
Strange
what you say about Peter Parker.
I'm sorry, folks, it's the truth. And I love Tom Holland's Peter Parker, but, like... he's a little too eager to be on, to be an authority figure, like Peter's a canonical Mets fan in the MCU, and he acts like a Yankee fan, folks. What can I say? And like Doctor Strange is, again, he's a little too, like, he literally winks and smiles at the camera in the No Way Home trailer, and it's great, and I love it, but I think the potential for danger with the character should be there more, and this episode explores that really well with terrific visuals. It feels a little bit closer to the versions of the character as it was, created by Steve Ditko, and through some of the darker stories that were especially told in the 1970s. It makes me forgive a lot of the other very valid criticisms here.
I do hope that the Doctor Strange from this episode of What If is closer to the Doctor Strange that we're going to get in Multiverse of Madness than the one we saw in the No Way Home trailer.
You mean Mephisto?
Listening to you talk about Peter Parker, it just hammers home for me the importance of having different kinds of hero stories, because, to me, that character is someone who's more interesting because I have struggled with being a people pleaser. So to me, that like struggle is more interesting versus like someone like Doctor Strange struggling with limiting the corrupt actions he takes as someone who has a lot of privilege. That is not as interesting to me as someone who hasn't, struggled with that in the same way. So just thinking about all this.
Just something for Feige to consider.
Yeah, if you're watching.
Kev, and we know you are. Just, keep it on the back burner.
Assuming we don't get a cease and desist from Kevin Feige's lawyers, this has been another episode of Marvel Standom, and we'll be back next week for more What If and more of what the MCU multiverse has to offer. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at Marvel Standom. We're also at Den of Geek US and at Den of Geek. You can find us on our web home at denofgeek.com, or you can go straight to denofgeek.com/Marvel for all of our MCU coverage. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back soon.